Welcome. I'm Jeff Brickler. Welcome to the fifth episode of the CAD Talk Integrate Intelligently podcast. As I mentioned, I'm Jeff Brickler, and I'm joined today with founder and CEO of CAD Talk, Scott Brickler. Scott, again, it's our fifth episode, so finally getting some rhythm, some familiarity, some comfortability with being on camera and talking this way with each other. So good to have you again.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good. Another week goes by, and another podcast we're doing about one of these a week. So that's exciting, finding that rhythm. So over the last several weeks, last 3-4 weeks, we've been talking about our core values, who CAD Talk is. A lot of those core values, I think, are fundamental to who you are and your vision for not just the product, but for the service and the company that you're looking to build. And so today is our final value, which is called outstanding outcomes. Like in true form, it's another alliterative value. So I want to make sure that when I talk about define the value, that I get the information correct. We have it here. I'm going to read that value here, so we get that definition correct, and then we'll talk a little bit what that means to you. Maybe share a little bit about how you came to that value, why it was important to you. Maybe share some stories from when you first started, either in business or just with customers, and myself included. I have some stories that I'd like to tell. So let's get started. Are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So outstanding outcomes. So the outstanding outcomes at CAD Talk, we're focusing on the delivering exceptional results, particularly in our customer service. I think it embodies the principle of going above and beyond in every aspect, interaction with our customers. The core idea is to be so good that the customers can't ignore you, that you're more than just another tool in the toolbox. You provide more value than they could possibly expect. This approach aims to foster loyalty, reduce churn rates, and drive growth. The value encourages not settling for mediocrity, but instead striving for excellence. This includes that our product offers more than expected, with additional features that anticipate our customers' needs. It involves over-communicating, personalized customer experiences, such as thoughtful gestures in the first 100 days of customer onboarding, leveraging the team's expertise in manufacturing to provide insights and build strong relationships. The overarching goal is to create disproportionately positive outcomes for both customers and employees by consistently exceeding expectations and investing in quality relationships. So that's a lot to say, I think, to talk about, what an outstanding outcome is. So Scott, in your mind, what was the driving, out of all the values we discussed so far: intelligent integration, relentless reinvention, fast and focus, and radical responsibility, and outstanding outcomes is kind of the ending up with this. What made this value important to you? Why outstanding outcomes?
I think obviously it's good for business. It's also good for the customers, right? So it's kind of a win-win situation. So, and I really focused on the word outstanding. I think outstanding was really the driver of that, because I remember hearing one time that it was kind of like there was a comparison. It's like if you do good, then if you shoot for good, then you get kind of okay results, or you get like poor results. If you shoot for great, then you just kind of get good results. But if you shoot for outstanding, which is like not even that much more than like great, that's where all the, it's kind of a winner take all type of thing. So it's where all the benefit lies. Like being outstanding is what people remember and really makes you stand out. And that's where you get the outstanding results as well. That's the only time actually it's equal, because especially as the world gets more sophisticated and the expectations of software and services and things like that are rising. And in order to differentiate, you have to do something that's essentially outstanding. It has to be something, like, by definition, it's not like everyone else. So I really wanted to hone in on that idea of outstanding when we talk about like what we do for our customers. And so it's kind of like when we were looking for the alliterations, it was like, well, I know I want something about that revolves around, customer service, but I want outstanding to be in the name. So
yeah. So what, in your mind, what are the hallmarks of outstanding? I mean, going above and beyond what customers expect, but what does that look like? Well, what do customers expect, or what would you expect as a customer? I mean, I always think about, for me at least, anything I do, I think about what is it that I would want. That's not always 100% the best gauge, but I think I'm like any other customer in terms of I'm a customer of products. I know what I like. I know what I like to see from products that I use. So what are the hallmarks? Like where do you start? What are some of the hallmarks of that outstanding outcome that that are repeatable, that you say, regardless of the product, regardless of Cat Talk or any other organization, what are the things that companies must do to be outstanding?
Yeah. If I had to really boil it down to like one trait or one thing that would, that would be anticipation. So anticipation, like when you think about a really good employee or somebody who really helps you or somebody who's really, they anticipate your needs even before you articulate them. And they're already knowing, and they have so much expertise around what you're doing, and they understand it so well, and they know what you're wanting next even before you know it. And then they just they're there with that thing, right? So if you like, I think when couples live together for a long time, they start knowing each other so well, they know, like your wife might know exactly what kind of thing that you need from that moment, because when you're feeling bad, you like really like chocolate chip cookies, and then she brings a cookie, because she knows that you're upset. So it's kind of like that. Like, how could you get that type of situation with the customer? So like in our case, when we're implementing CAD Talk, the way that we can do that is solving the problem and really understanding the domain and the problem really, really well, and know the kind of struggles that customers are seeing and have lived that. So the people that we implement with who've been in manufacturing and they've suffered with this problem and they've seen the issues, and and when we talk to them, we're almost like, oh, you probably have this issue, and you probably have done this, and then they're already kind of like, wow, you really know me. So they're getting that rapport and anticipating kind of what their situation is, builds up that's unexpected. They're used to somebody who doesn't understand anything about what they're doing and just literally installing stuff and telling them how it works. But really having somebody who looks like them, anticipates their needs, and kind of talks about it is, and then along the way also, also offering up suggestions or improvements upon what they're already doing. And so having more of a consultative kind of experience of like, hey, I know I saw that happen before. The other customers have done X, and this is what we've seen, and this is kind of like when they've gone this direction, they've kind of had this problem. So I think we can cut that out by doing this with what we learned. So just kind of always providing way more value than they could possibly expect. Because I think a lot of people, when they get something, yeah, they expect to get the thing and they expect that to be broken. But short of that, they're just kind of like, I think about like, back in the 70s, it was like very common for things to come in a box and the thing be broken. And then during the 80s, this is, just kind of circling back to manufacturing, which is like a lot of our focus of our customers, is like somewhere on the 80s, I think it was 80s and 90s, the quality movement came about, where it was Six Sigma and all of these different efforts in order to improve the quality of the products. Now, when you open a box, no matter where it came from, we pretty much expect it to be in one piece and work and things like that. That bar is now like, yes, at least it could work. But back then, like, people were just astounded to actually have the thing be there, all the pieces, and it working. That's now table stakes. This is now another level of that. So each level, we keep leveling that up into more and more expectations. And then, so becoming outstanding is a harder thing to meet each time. So it's a continuous action that we're always applying and trying to get better as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. When you talked about anticipation, like anticipating the needs, that kind of brought me back to being a kid, with, our father worked, not an engineer, but very mechanical, worked with his hands. I remember he had his own auto body shop repair, and I would be there, and he would work on the cars, and we'd work all kinds of things as kids. Probably how both of us got familiar with, not say manufacturing, but getting familiar with the kind of industrial arts, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about one of the things that I remember that our father used to tell me or praise me for, is that anticipation, that I knew what he would need, right? We were underneath the car and it's dark and the light and you need a tool, or like I was always looking and trying to see what the next thing was he needed, right? What the next thing was, the next tool, where the light needed to be, how could I be helpful there? So I think that's kind of getting at, this is kind of a personal story, getting at what you were talking about, is really understanding where the customer, right? And in this case, when I was a kid, it was our father, where the customer wants to go, right? What they want to accomplish, what they're trying to do. But to do that, you have to really pay attention and what they're trying to accomplish, and anticipate that they have in their hand whatever the tool they need at the time they need it, right? Even before they know they need it, or even better yet, hey, wouldn't this be a better tool in this circumstance? Because sometimes, I remember even when I was a kid, Dad would ask for a tool and say, hey, and that tool was not the best tool. It's just the one that he had sitting around that he wanted me to get. And say, hey, wouldn't it be better to use this other thing, or I offer an idea? And so I just think about that as anticipation, how important that is if you can do that, and how underrated that skill is, I think, because people, it's to anticipate requires a lot of knowledge of what this person's trying to do, to observe, to watch, and then to think ahead, because you're actually thinking ahead of that person and knowing they're going to be in a certain place. I need to be ready for that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, there's exactly. I mean, and like, because it's very common for people just to kind of get with customers and just like do what they say. Like the customer just says, I want this, and they give them that. And it's like that kind of that idea of don't give them what they want, give them what they need. And there's like other comment of like, I know as a coach uses, is called chocolate broccoli. People, you get them in with the chocolate, but you give them the broccoli because that's what they really need, is the broccoli. And there's a lot of that. I think like if you just kind of, a lot of times especially if somebody's getting something new or they're buying a product or something like that, the chances of them knowing your product better than you do is pretty slim, right? I mean, you're solving a problem. And I think that people think about software or any kind of tool that you buy is the actual solution, but it's actually the whole package that you're getting. It's the services and the expertise and all of that coming together. I think we can make it outstanding and use that anticipation is like if somebody comes and they say, hey, I want to solve this problem of integrating my systems or whatever the problem is. And you're like, and then they start going, and then a lot of times, like, especially in our world, like our customers try to tell us like how we should solve it, right? And it's like, and you're like, well, like, and then if you can also kind of direct them in the right direction and lead them, because people kind of want to be led into the right solution. You can lead them and provide a lot more value, and you can skip over the pitfalls that they might step into, as opposed to like just kind of blindly doing what they ask, right? Which is what people think a lot of customer service is, just doing what the customer exactly asks you for. And I mean, that's a good first step. I mean, at least, but really it comes down to leading them in the right direction and also communicating with them what direction we're going, so they don't feel lost. And right. It's like, it's a very common, maybe it's a subtle distinction, but I think that's the idea, is that the customer's always right. I'm like, well, the customer only is right in the context they understand. And so if part of that job of creating the outstanding outcome is to give them the better context, and then lead them along the way so they get the outcome they're looking for. And so I think it's definitely different than what I think a lot of people approach it. In order to do that, you have to kind of look at what they're doing. So one of the things, like example, that's like, we just literally had a story this morning where their sport case came in, and one of our guys, and we're training the guy, so he's still new on that role, and he kind of responded to the customer like, hey, I need to know this, and this, like, and I was coaching him, and I said, well, two of those things you can find out without asking them. It's like, and they don't understand, and like, you can go look it up in our system, or you can go find it there. You can go find that without asking them. So because like asking them is not like they have a problem, and now you're asking them a bunch of questions, which doesn't give them the best experience, right? They're like, well, I want to, that thing isn't working, and you're like, well, tell me this, tell me this, tell me this, and you just gave them a bunch of homework, and like anything that you can find out for them and look for it, or just anticipate, like, what they're looking for, and it's in our system somewhere. There's some kind of log somewhere that we can figure it out from. Do that, because then you're limiting down the information they got to provide. Don't like, it's like don't give the customer homework unless they need to do the homework in order to do the thing they need to do. And just that it's that small distinction of like, do the extra thing to answer the questions. Don't put it back on the customer to do all of that. And just we constantly kind of teach people that and train. It's very little subtle things like that, a bunch of little things that you have to put together in order for the customer to feel like these guys are really helpful, as opposed to like, man, every time I call these guys, it's like and they may not even say it's like, oh, it's like a lot of work or it's belaboring. It's just that they have that feeling, that slow itch, like that pebble in your shoe type thing that just drives them nuts. And then so it's a lot of little small adjustments to what you do in order to make that feeling of like these guys really get it, as opposed to like what most people do.
Yeah, it kind of gets to, I mean, how does, anticipation is awesome, but how does communication involved in that? Or how do you see communication as part of achieving that outstanding outcome?
Yeah. Heard a great comment the other day. I was listening to something and it was like, nobody ever got fired for over communicating. And I always thought that was a good statement. It's like, I mean, communication is it's pretty hard to over communicate. I think almost like I'm surprised there's even a word called over communication, because when it comes to business, like it's pretty hard to do it. I mean, it's a general rule, because like people don't live inside your head. They just don't live there, right? But like, I think there's this kind of tendency, especially if you're like knee deep in a problem or something's happening, you're just trying to solve it. And I know a lot of technical people, and I was technical early in my career too, is like, I'm going to spend all my time communicating and none of my time doing the actual thing you want me to do. And then I used to like use that as justification for like not communicating well, right? Let me go solve this thing, instead of telling you every 5 minutes that it's not working yet. So, but it really comes down to like, you know, but I don't believe that anymore, because I understand that like I was just communicating badly. That's why I had to communicate more. So if I communicate badly, and not tell them enough information, then I'll have to do it more often. So over communicating or communicate is not necessarily how often you do it. It's really the substance of what you tell them, as well. So like, I think one time it's like, well, it's not, if you call them up and they say, it's not working yet. And then, they're like, okay, well, call me back in 10 minutes and tell me if it's not working yet again. And that's what's going to happen. That's the result. So you're going to end up communicating a lot. If you say, hey, we looked at this isn't working. We're going to try about 3 or 4 more things here, and then I will come back to you within 4 hours with an update. That's good communication, right? I guess you say it's over. You told them a lot of things, but you've now set the expectation. You've led them in the direction you want them to go, and they feel more secure about what you're doing. That not just, well, it's broken. Nothing. I got nothing else going on. So, and that's just one of those things you got to coach on. Like communication is just essential to like, for people to feel secure about what's going on and how things are flowing, even though you might be working very, very busily, on the back end doing your thing. But if they don't know, like, I think everybody kind of anticipates that default behavior is like, well, they're not working on my thing. They're not doing anything with it. They're just not going anywhere. And just the more you let them, like, and also if you can do it more frequently too, it makes them think there's a lot of things going on, and and have that feeling that things are moving forward. And people, one of the like, was it, one of the key things that humans need, like 6 human needs or whatever it is, and one of them's like, it's like love and connection, love, connection, food, like all these things. But one of them is progress. People want to see progress. If they don't see progress, then they don't, it's a human need. They're not happy. So the communication allows you to get credit for the progress that you've made.
Yeah, I think one of my mantras has always been, I'm going to say what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do what I'm going to say. When you have that, right, it makes the outstanding outcome much easier, because you're telling, this could be in anything, relationships, any kind of relationships, right? Relationships with at work. So relationships that you have at work between coworkers, with your boss, or your the people who work for you, or with customers or partners or anybody, is to be very clear about, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do it by this time, and then then deliver on that, right? And then just come back and do the thing that you said you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you say what you do. And I always try to, it's very kind of a pithy way to explain in my mind, what an outstanding outcome looks like, because if you do that, people, then they know. It's
Oh
similar
yeah.
to like when you go to the airport, right? And if there's a delay at the airport, there's a problem, and they communicate, hey, uh, we, the plane's broken, or we need to get a part, or replace a part. We don't have ETA, or when we're going to do that. It's going to be at least an hour. So if anything changes between now and the next hour, we'll update you. Otherwise, expect another update in an hour. And then an hour comes by, and then they say, "Yep, it was this is your hourly update. The part we expected it to be at least an hour. That part is not yet here, and we expect it to be another 30, 40 minutes before we find out. We'll come back 30 or 40 minutes later and let you know if that part's here." And they just keep telling you every step along the way. It's kind of like the road signs, right? How do
Oh
you
yeah.
know? How do you know if you're going to get somewhere if you don't see the signs, right? You don't see the markers, the mile markers, the signs telling you you're going the right place. Otherwise, you're just like, am I lost?
Oh yeah. I think it's very good. So it kind of reminded me of something tactical that's probably hopefully very useful for the listeners. That like I took me a long time to learn as a technical guy in the beginning. It was like people would always ask you, like when you write code or whatever, it's like, well, how long is it going to take? How long is this going to take? And then and there's so many unknowns. Like there's so many things that you don't have any idea what's going to happen, and you need time to think about it and then get some questions answered and really do some. And so you're like, but they want an answer, right? So you get into this kind of like catch-22 type situation or chicken and egg problem. Like, well, I need time in order to give you the answer to how long it's going to take, right? It's kind of the irony of this situation. And one, it was like a former business colleague of mine. He's just like, well, what can you tell them? I say, well, he says, well, you can tell them how long it will take till you can give them the final answer. And I thought that was like, oh, okay, that's like it didn't seem intuitive, but I guess it kind of makes a lot of sense, which is like I don't know how long it will take. It will take me some, but I do know in 4 hours from now I will know better. I will know more, or in 4 hours I will know the answer, or 2 days, or whatever it is. So it's like, hey, today's Friday. By Monday, I will be able to tell you how long it will take to do the rest of it. And that now you're setting. Now you know there's a you've given them a timeline. You've given them something they can work with that lets them know what the next step is, as opposed to I don't know. I don't know how long this will take, or I'll let you know. There's no outcome. There's nothing they can look for. And I thought that was a very cool tactical thing to do. Is like, if you don't know how long something's going to take, tell them when you'll know.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like,
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Tell them the next thing you're going to do, right? Say
yeah,
what you're going to do, is do what you're going to say, right? I don't have all the information, but I know know the next step is to do this thing, whatever this thing is, right? I got to do this thing. And once I do that thing, I'll have some more information, and then I'll bring that back to you and tell you what I found out. But if you continue to do that, that builds a lot of trust, because normally as humans, right, I think to have outstanding outcomes, you got to build that trust up, that you're going to do what you say and say what you do. And once you do that, then the outstanding outcome will be there, because you're constantly working at it. I often wonder, I mean, I made mistakes, of course, when I was younger, just sort of learning, same kind of thing. It's like, I don't know anything. Why do I got to tell you something that I don't
Mhm.
know? And it's like, well, you can tell them that you don't know and that you're still working on it, or you can tell them what you intend to do and what you need to have happen for that to learn more. But
it's a whole like relationship bank account type of concept,
it
right?
is
It's where
very
you're like,
much.
which is like, you can't like when you meet, the balance is zero. Maybe it's a little bit negative because they're just a little
Mm-hmm.
bit apprehensive and they aren't sure like that you're going to do anything, and most people don't do anything, and then you're like, the more you communicate and the smaller you can break up the outcome into smaller pieces and like make little deposits. I'm gonna make it up. I make a little deposit, another little deposit, and then the customer's like, bank account's going up. This is great. I believe this is good. And the more deposits you make, the more money you have to make a withdrawal. Oh crap, we ran into a bug, or this is an issue here. There's gonna be a withdrawal, and then but if you don't do anything, you don't communicate. All those little communications and all those little small micro deliveries and things like that build up that just little small deposits in order to build that bank account on the relationship, so people feel more secure in the deal in the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relationships. Everything's about a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So a customer and a vendor is a relationship, a husband and a wife, a brother and a sister, a brother and a brother, a boss and an employee, a teacher and a student, right? I've been all of those things. And and many people have, but it's that relationship management and knowing that you're not going to deliver outstanding outcomes every day because we're all human, right? I didn't sleep well. I don't feel good. I'm sick, or my kid's in the hospital, or whatever the issue is, right? You're going to have challenges that'll make you less than optimal. But the more you can deliver on that, on being a good part of that relationship, you can deliver. You can Right. It's easy to get outstanding outcomes in any relationship when you keep working at it, right? And you keep trying to add to the relationship and deliver on what you say you're going to do, and show up and show up that way, and always try to get better. Acknowledge, hey, when you make a mistake, hey, I made a mistake, and then correct that, and not have it happen again over and over again. That sort of thing, that building up the relationships, will lead to an outstanding outcome for any relationship, marriage, father son, brother sister, brother brother, any of those, because it's the aggregate experience that people remember. It isn't the outcome isn't just one event, right? It's that whole experience, every of the relationship, because with people, right, it's kind of messy in the sense that we as humans, we're trying to do the best we can, and we don't always deliver because things change. We change every day. Did I sleep well? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I, did I stub my toe on the way to work? Did I,
Mm-hmm.
I lost my wallet, and so I'm upset about that. Whatever, right? It's whatever those things are, but it's the aggregate of the interactions that you have that lead to
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
the outcome.
the more leeway you have is, it's based on how much deposits you've already made, right? If they don't, and I think especially the customer relationship, like especially early, you don't have that equity yet. Now, if you have a good brand, that's one thing that's interesting about, not to go to a sidetrack about brand, but you think about a brand is like starting with a deposit.
Right.
It's literally like if you're Apple and and like you already start with $100 in the account, right? And then you only can go, then you have, so you can actually make a mistake, the first, like the Apple store, a small mistake could happen. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you have no brand, then you're literally starting at zero, and you have to build it up over time. And then so the idea that's one of the like benefits of, so an outstanding outcome, if you have a good brand, you even have like the road to the outstanding outcome is even shorter, because you only have to like not take a big deposit, not do something really drastically wrong,
Right.
and it gets you closer to that, which is why people, because of the fact that the brand is why they can charge a premium for a brand product, which is essentially what a brand is. It's like the ability to charge more than the baseline, um, because of the fact that there's that guaranteed, that relationship's already there with equity there, and the opportunity to get to an outstanding outcome is much more likely.
Right.
You know,
So what does that look like for? I mean, it's been I guess it's been a while maybe since that you implemented a customer, right? But what does that look like for what we do, right? What our product does? What does that outstanding outcome look like for a customer who is integrating their systems using Cat Talk? What does that look like?
well, I think that's one of the reasons why first of all, is like we have architects, that we have a job here called a solutions architect, and that architect is has typically worked in manufacturing or has been in that position of the customer. A lot of sometimes it used to be customers themselves, and by having that architect in there, is the idea of like, they're not just software implementers who are coming in and telling you this is how it works, and things like that. We select very specifically those type of people in order to have a relationship with the customer be even smoother, and to also provide guidance and anticipate what their needs are going to be, because they understand it so deeply, they've lived it. And so it's usually like we want to have people who came from essentially a customer profile, like looks like the customer themselves, right? And that already builds a rapport right out the gate that that hopefully starts us out with a deposit right out the gate. Okay, oh, I know this guy. He could work here. He's very similar to me. He looks like me. He has a similar type of job and things like that. And so that's one way that we create that. Where I think a lot of softwares just kind of have people, they train them on the software, they train them on how things work, but they don't necessarily have that extra component. And it makes it harder. It's harder for us to, we got to recruit that. We have to get those types of people who have those types of expertise in place. But that's one of the things that we do in order to provide that kind of outstanding outcome, is because when people buy things, they don't, yes, they sometimes like higher ticket purchases, they'll have consultants who do that and things like that. But to have that, who actually close to that, to your customer profile, have people really implementing and have it close to the profile, I think provides a little extra in that experience. And then the product, the way that we've always, from a nuts and bolts, like how we design the product, we, I guess from a design philosophy from the very beginning was to make the product very configurable. So it's not simple, but it's configurable. So that was a conscious decision. Like, as having both, it's hard to have something that's simple that's also flexible, right? So you always kind of on that, you always think about the dichotomy of that, like flexible and configurable, or flexible and simple are like different ends of the spectrum, right? And then you're always in that realm, right? And if you can make it, so you're always trying to like balance those two things by making it, knowing the audience as being engineers and things like that. And it's usually manufacturing. Like, I chose at the beginning to make the product more flexible as opposed to making it more simple, because I wanted to be able to cover more use cases and make it more useful to more customers, and to allow them the flexibility to make it work for their process. Because I'd worked in manufacturing, and I knew that, like, if you're an engineer to order, you had these types of weird things that happen. If you were the site company, you had other types of constraints that you wanted to be able to do. So you wanted the product to be able to be flexible enough to fit in all those different use cases. And I also think that people didn't want it to be customized, completely custom. So by having it be configurable and flexible, but without it being customized, was also a way of providing outstanding outcome, because I think custom software has a lot of downsides to it, right? You have to pay to have it changed, and and then you don't take on all the new benefits of the change of existing. You're not getting as much of the advantages of people, all the customers feeding into one product and having the improvements. So because you have a custom version of it and all of these different types of things. So that doesn't produce the best outcome. It just produces something that does exactly what you want. And it can't grow, you can't grow with it, right? So that was all the way that we did that. Was like, so it's a couple of different approaches. One being that we implement with people who have expertise that look like the customer, who understand the customer problem deeply. And then we provide enough flexibility in the product to allow them to mold it to the way they do their business, as opposed to forcing them in a direction that may not be a good fit for them. And then it's also just, and also pairing that architect with a project manager who does a really good job of the communication and making sure that they understand what's going on and things like that. So one of the things we've learned over the years is that the person who does the technical work typically isn't always the best person to communicate. And pairing a good communicator, a project planning type person, with a technical person works really well. It might cost more, but it produces a better outcome in the long run. So I think there's a combination of things that we do that we think are pretty unique. Some things are still common, but some that are actually quite unique in our industry, in order to push us as being a higher quality and something that has a likelihood of producing an outstanding outcome.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to know that you thought about how to make outstanding outcomes for our customers, right? How to deliver on that, not just from a product standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, so that the customer and the relationships that we have, people feel that they're getting they're getting that outcome. So today wraps up our final episode on our values, right? The 5 core values that CAD Talk. So just before we leave, Scott, what advice do you have to a founder or a business owner, or someone working in business who's looking to find their values and or to come up with their similar values to what you've come up with. What do you recommend they go about doing that?
Yeah, I think that I remember doing that, going through this exercise, and I think I actually got some help. Like nowadays, you got better tooling to help you with that. I think I used ChatGPT to kind of help me brainstorm, which really worked well. But I think the idea is the things that if you got enough experience and you had enough conversations managing people, and you kind of look at the themes of what you've talked to people about over and over and over again, and about like why you decided to do X and why you decided to do Y, and then you start distilling that down. It starts really ferreting out. You're like, oh, I see now, kind of why this is what I actually believe, right? And then like my favorite outcome, which is relentless reinvention, which is I think that one I came up with right off the bat because it's just it just speaks to the kind of the ethos of how of us and how we think and things. But that one was really easy because it's just like what are we always doing? Always trying to learn, always trying to get better, always trying to find a better way. Always, I mean, the product literally came from reinventing a process and reinventing how we did it because I hated this job that I had in the beginning. So I think a lot of it's just having to do with like what do you say where and you've said it so many times, people literally make fun of you for saying it, and those are probably the things that you believe the most. And I would start with those first. That's a good place to start.
Are there any values you considered that didn't get added? I mean, you have just 5, and I think that the purpose of just 5 is to have them have enough to cover all the things you wanted to cover, but also not to be unlimited because too many, of course, kind of crowds out the others. So, are there any that you considered that you would have made, or maybe that you had just considered but decided not to?
Yeah, there was a couple other ones that I thought about, but I couldn't. Some of them they rolled into the other ones. I could make an argument that they rolled into the other ones. I remember one explicitly, which was like something about candor, and it was like, it was about like I couldn't think of a way.
Alliterative, I'm sure.
What's that?
I'm sure it was alliterative too. Some sort of, something candor, right? Like carrying candor or something.
But it was like the idea that we always you tell the truth exactly, right? Which is hard to. I think the problem we came away from it was I think there's a book about it that talks about that where literally you just tell people the truth, like exactly the way it is. It's like you don't do the little white lies and that kind of stuff. I think it was something that was really popular in Silicon Valley for a long time. I'm somewhat of a proponent of that, right? It's like I'd rather know the truth than you try to preserve my feelings, right? And I believe that. I actually do operate that way when I'm given information. I don't know that a lot of people would choose that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm guessing that most people would not want you to tell them the truth, regardless of their feelings. I'm sure that people, myself included, would appreciate sparing the feelings.
I think it just has to do, but which kind of ties into the idea of the relentless reinvention. It's like the feedback was the way to get the faster feedback loop of knowing exactly what the truth was led you to faster reinvention, led you to faster continuous improvement. So that idea of the radical, I know it was radical candor. I think that's what it was. It was radical candor was the book. And I like the idea of it. I just didn't think it was something that it would be hard to implement. It would be hard to like articulate correctly too, without people just turning into jerks to each other and stuff like that. So it was like, it seemed like a bad path to go down. And maybe if slowing down the feedback a little bit for improvement, maybe it was a good trade-off, but maybe we'll bring it back later. But that was definitely one I remember that I strongly considered, but I couldn't figure it was going to be very difficult to articulate and get people to get it without kind of overcorrecting one way or the other, if that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, feedback is always tough for both the giver and the receiver because it needs to be done. But how do you give it in such a way that's constructive that the person can hear it? So,
absolutely. Yeah, and like you could, and there's actually companies I think who actually have that as one of their values, and I think that and they operate that way, and they found a way to train on that because with one of these values, I think a lot of people just create values and they put them in a book somewhere, or they put them on like a poster and then they forget about them. Like we literally have like a you have to reinforce them, and like I mentioned earlier, you have to say them so much people literally make fun of you for saying them, right? It's like you got to just put that out there all the time. And we talk about it every quarterly, we even talk about it in terms like guys, it's not an outstanding outcome. We can't do that. Like, or you're not taking radical responsibility for that. You need to like drive it to the end. That like we say that in our everyday meetings in order to drive those things home. And we even have this like employee of the quarter thing that we do every quarter where we actually give an award out, a little bonus to whoever's exhibited who's ever been most aligned or exhibited the most values of certain values, and then really drive that home and just kind of constantly remind and talk about that in order to drive those concepts home, because just having them isn't enough. You got to live them and really bring them up a lot and bring them into your normal conversations every day to make them stick, because otherwise it's like it's being intentional about the culture and how you want things to go. So
yeah, well, Scott, this I think it's going to come to a close here. I enjoyed talking about our values, talking about how you came up with them and how you see them and how you see them at CAD Talk and with our customers. So that this was a good conversation that kind of finishes out those. And as we begin to explore other topics, maybe guests or other topics, educational topics or other areas of discussion, I look forward to bringing these back around where they make sense and a good foundation for the discussion in the future. So again, thanks everyone for listening. Subscribe to us anywhere you find podcasts and subscribe to us on YouTube. Scott, do you have any other kind of closing remarks?
No, I'm just really enjoying this process. I think some of the future topics are going to be, really interesting to talk about. I think sometimes we'll get technical and sometimes we'll get, more general business type stuff, but I'm just really excited about the future of the podcast. So.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening.